The black luxury car pulled up to the small children's home on Maple Street. Inside sat Victoria Hayes, one of the richest women in the city. Her company had made millions from technology, but her heart seemed as cold as the winter morning outside. Victoria stepped out of the car, her expensive heels clicking on the pavement. She wore a designer coat that probably cost more than most people made in a month. Her assistant, carrying a briefcase full of papers, hurried to keep up with her quick steps. "Let's get this over with," Victoria muttered under her breath. She didn't want to be here, but her lawyers had told her she needed to do charity work for tax reasons. Visiting an orphanage seemed like the easiest way to check that box. The director of Sunshine Children's Home, Mrs. Peterson, greeted them at the front door. She was a kind woman in her 50s who had dedicated her life to caring for children who had nowhere else to go. Her warm smile was a sharp contrast to Victoria's cold expression. "Welcome, Ms. Hayes," Mrs. Peterson said cheerfully. "Thank you so much for coming. The children are very excited to meet you." Victoria barely nodded. She looked around the simple building with its worn carpets and outdated furniture. Everything here was clean but old. The walls were covered with colorful drawings made by the children, but Victoria barely glanced at them. "How many children do you have here?" Victoria asked, checking her expensive watch. She wanted to get through this visit as quickly as possible. "We currently care for 23 children," Mrs. Peterson replied, leading them down a hallway lined with photos of smiling kids. They range from ages 5 to 17. Each one has their own story, their own dreams. Victoria wasn't really listening. She was thinking about the important business meeting she had later that afternoon. This visit was just something she had to do, like going to the dentist or paying taxes. They walked into a large room where several children were playing. Some were reading books, others were drawing, and a few were playing board games. The moment the children saw Mrs. Peterson with visitors, they looked up with curious eyes. "Children, I'd like you to meet Ms. Hayes," Mrs. Peterson announced. "She's here to visit with us today." The children said hello politely, but they could sense that this woman was different from their usual visitors. She didn't smile back at them or ask their names. Instead, she stood stiffly in her expensive clothes, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. "Tell me about some of your children," Victoria said to Mrs. Peterson. Though she sounded more bored than interested, Mrs. Peterson's eyes lit up. She loved talking about the kids she cared for. "Well, there's little Tommy over there. He's 7 and loves dinosaurs. He can tell you the name of every dinosaur that ever lived." Victoria glanced at the boy briefly. And that's Lucy in the corner. She's 15 and wants to be a doctor someday. She gets perfect grades in all her science classes." Victoria nodded absently, still checking her watch. Mrs. Peterson noticed Victoria's lack of interest, but continued anyway. "And then there's our Lily. She's 12 years old and one of the sweetest children you'll ever meet." "What's special about her?" Victoria asked, not because she cared, but because she felt she should ask something. Mrs. Peterson's voice became softer. "Lily lost both her parents in a car accident 2 years ago. She had no other family, so she came to live with us. She was so sad at first, barely spoke for months, but slowly she started to open up again." Victoria finally looked in the direction Mrs. Peterson was pointing. In a quiet corner of the room sat a girl with brown hair tied back in a simple ponytail. She was reading a book by herself, occasionally glancing up at the other children with gentle eyes. "She's very bright," Mrs. Peterson continued. "Gets excellent grades in school. But more than that, she has such a kind heart. She helps the younger children with their homework and always shares her snacks." Victoria studied the girl for a moment. Lily looked ordinary to her. Just another orphan among many. Nothing particularly special or impressive. "Does she have any talents?" Victoria asked, though she wasn't sure why she was asking. Mrs. Peterson thought for a moment. "Well, she loves to read, and she's very good at helping others. She has a gentle way with the younger children." Victoria made a dismissive sound. "Reading, how ordinary." Mrs. Peterson felt a flash of irritation at Victoria's attitude, but kept her voice calm. "Not every talent has to be flashy, Ms. Hayes. Sometimes the most important talents are the quiet ones." Victoria's eyes wandered around the room and landed on an old piano sitting in the corner. It was clearly ancient, probably donated years ago by someone who didn't want it anymore. The wood was scratched, and some of the keys looked yellowed with age. A cruel smile crossed Victoria's face. She had an idea that amused her. "Does she play piano?" Victoria asked, nodding toward the old instrument. Lily? No. I don't think any of our children play piano. We don't have anyone here who can teach them. Victoria's smile grew wider, but there was no warmth in it. Well then, I have a proposal. Mrs. Peterson looked puzzled. What kind of proposal? Victoria spoke loud enough for several children to hear, including Lily, who looked up from her book. I'll tell you what. If that girl can play piano, I'll adopt her. The room fell silent. Even the children who had been playing stopped what they were doing. Mrs. Peterson stared at Victoria in shock. I'm sorry, what did you say? Mrs. Peterson asked, hoping she had misheard. Victoria laughed, clearly enjoying herself now. You heard me. If she can sit down at that old piano and actually play something real music, not just random notes, I'll take her home with me. Give her all the advantages money can buy. Mrs. Peterson felt her heart sink. She knew this was Victoria's idea of a joke. Ms. Hayes, as I mentioned, none of our children have had piano lessons. That's not really fair. Life isn't fair, Victoria replied with a shrug. If she's as special as you say, she'll figure it out. Talent finds a way, doesn't it? Some of the older children had gathered closer, listening to the conversation. Lily had closed her book and was watching Victoria with wide, serious eyes. Besides, Victoria continued, I'm offering her a chance at a life most of these children could only dream of. Private schools, expensive clothes, a big house. All she has to do is prove she has something special inside her. Mrs. Peterson wanted to tell Victoria exactly what she thought of this cruel game, but she knew she couldn't afford to anger such a wealthy donor. The children's home needed every bit of financial support it could get. And if she can't play? Mrs. Peterson asked quietly. Victoria shrugged again. Then I guess she stays here with the rest of them. No harm done. But there was harm being done, and everyone in the room could feel it. Victoria had just dangled hope in front of a 12-year-old girl who had already lost everything once before. Victoria gathered her coat and headed toward the door. I'll come back in a few weeks. Give her some time to practice. She said the last word like it was a joke. As Victoria walked toward the exit, she turned back one last time. Oh, and Mrs. Peterson? Make sure she knows this is a real offer. If she can play piano, really play, not just bang on the keys, she'll never have to worry about anything again. The door closed behind Victoria with a firm click, leaving behind a room full of children and one very angry director. But in the corner, a 12-year-old girl named Lily was staring at the old piano with a look of determination that surprised everyone who saw it. Lily had been standing in the hallway when she heard every word. She wasn't trying to spy on anyone. She had just been coming back from the bathroom when she heard the rich woman's voice getting louder and more cruel. Now she sat on her bed, staring at the wall. The other children in her room were buzzing with excitement and worry, all talking about what had just happened. Can you believe that lady? Said Amy, her roommate who was 14. What kind of person says something like that? She was just being mean, added little Beth, who was only 8. Some grown-ups think they're better than everyone else. But Lily wasn't listening to their chatter. Her mind was spinning with thoughts and feelings she couldn't quite put into words. Part of her felt angry at Victoria for making such a cruel joke. Part of her felt embarrassed that she had been singled out in front of everyone. But underneath all of that, there was something else growing, something that felt almost like hope. What if she could learn? What if this wasn't just a mean joke, but actually a real chance? Lily had been at the children's home for 2 years now, ever since the accident that took her parents. She had learned to be grateful for Mrs. Peterson's kindness and the other children's friendship. But late at night, when the room was dark and quiet, she still dreamed about having a real family again. A place where she truly belonged. She tried to push those thoughts away. Victoria Hayes didn't seem like the kind of person who would make a good mother. She was cold and mean, and she clearly looked down on children like Lily. But still, she had made an offer. A real offer. That evening at dinner, everyone was still talking about Victoria's visit. The older kids were making jokes about the stuck-up rich lady, while the younger ones asked lots of questions about what adoption meant. Don't pay any attention to her, sweetie, Mrs. Peterson said when she sat down next to Lily. Some people say things they don't mean. She was just trying to show off. Lily nodded politely, but she wasn't convinced. Something in Victoria's voice when she made the offer had sounded serious. Mean, yes, but serious too. After dinner, Lily helped clean up the dishes like she always did. Then, instead of joining the other kids for their evening movie, she slipped away to the big room where the piano sat in the corner. The room was empty now. During the day it was full of noise and laughter, but in the evening it felt different, quieter, more peaceful. Lily walked slowly over to the old piano. Up close, she could see all its imperfections. The wood was scratched and faded. Some of the white keys were yellowed with age, and a few of the black keys had chips in them. But despite its worn appearance, there was something beautiful about it. She sat down on the bench and looked at all the keys. There were so many of them, black and white, arranged in a pattern that seemed to repeat itself. She had seen people play piano in movies and on TV, but she had never really thought about how it worked. Slowly, carefully, she pressed down on one of the white keys. It made a clear, clean sound that seemed to hang in the air for a moment before fading away. She pressed another key, this one making a slightly different sound, then another. The sounds weren't music, just random notes, but something about making them made her feel calm. Like for just a moment, all her worries about the future could wait. She tried pressing several keys at the same time, but that just made a muddy, ugly sound. She tried playing keys in order from left to right, but that didn't sound like music either. After about 10 minutes, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Quickly, she closed the piano cover and hurried back to her room before anyone could see her. That night, as she lay in bed listening to her roommates breathing softly in their sleep, Lily made a decision. She would try to learn to play piano, not because Victoria Hayes deserved her effort, but because maybe, just maybe, this was her chance to change her life. She knew it wouldn't be easy. She had no teacher, no books, no idea where to even start. But she also knew that she had something many people didn't have: time and determination. The next morning, Lily woke up early and went to the piano before anyone else was awake. She lifted the cover quietly and sat down on the bench. This time, instead of just pressing random keys, she tried to listen more carefully to the sounds they made. She noticed that as she moved from left to right across the keyboard, the sounds got higher, and as she moved from right to left, they got lower. It was like the keys were arranged in some kind of order, like stairs made of sound. She spent about 20 minutes just exploring this idea, trying to understand how the keys related to each other. Then she heard Mrs. Peterson getting up in her room down the hall, so she quickly closed the piano and went to help get breakfast ready. All day at school, Lily found herself thinking about the piano. During math class, she drew pictures of the keyboard in the margins of her notebook, trying to remember which keys made which sounds. During English class, while they were reading a story about a girl who learned to play violin, Lily wondered if learning piano was anything like learning violin. That afternoon, when she got back to the children's home, she had to wait for her turn at the piano. Some of the other kids were playing in the big room, and she didn't want to draw attention to what she was doing. She did her homework and helped the younger children with theirs, just like always. But as soon as the room was empty again, she went back to the piano. This time, she opened the bench and looked inside. She found some old sheet music that was yellowed and torn, but she could still see the notes written on the lines. She had no idea what any of it meant, but she studied it anyway. She also found an old battered music book. The cover was falling off and many of the pages were loose, but it seemed to be some kind of beginner's guide. The first chapter was titled Finding Middle C. Lily had no idea what middle C was, but the book showed a picture of the keyboard with one key marked. She found that key on the real piano and pressed it. It made a sound that seemed to sit right in the middle of all the other sounds she had explored. For the next hour, she worked through the first few pages of the old book. It showed her how to find different notes and even had simple exercises where she could practice pressing one key at a time in different patterns. It was harder than she had expected. Her fingers felt clumsy and slow. Sometimes she would press the wrong key by accident, or she would forget which finger she was supposed to use. But slowly, very slowly, she started to understand how the keyboard worked. Over the next few days, Lily fell into a routine. She would wake up early and practice for a few minutes before breakfast. During school, she would think about what she had learned. And in the evening, after everyone else had gone to bed or moved to other parts of the building, she would go back to the piano and work through more pages of the old book. She told no one about what she was doing. When Amy asked her why she was so quiet lately, Lily just said she was thinking about school. When Mrs. Peterson noticed her getting up early, Lily said she liked to watch the sunrise from the big room windows. The truth was, Lily wasn't sure if her secret practice sessions would lead to anything. The music book was confusing, And teaching herself was much harder than she had imagined. Some days she felt like she was making progress. Other days she felt like she would never be able to play real music. But every time she thought about giving up, she remembered Victoria's cruel smile and her challenge. More than that, she remembered the feeling of hope that had grown in her chest when she first heard the offer. Even if Victoria turned out to be just as mean as she seemed, even if the adoption never happened, Lily realized she wanted to learn piano for herself. For the first time since her parents died, she had found something that made her feel like she might have a special talent of her own, something that was hers alone, and that feeling was worth all the secret practice sessions and sore fingers in the world. 2 weeks had passed since Victoria's visit, and Lily's secret piano sessions had become the most important part of her day. She had worked through most of the basic exercises in the old music book, and her fingers were starting to move more naturally across the keys. But she had a problem. The piano made noise, and even though she tried to play quietly, she worried that someone would hear her during her late-night practice sessions. The children's home had thin walls, and Mrs. Peterson was a light sleeper. One evening, as Lily sat at the piano trying to work through a simple melody, she heard soft footsteps in the hallway. Her heart jumped into her throat. She quickly lifted her hands from the keys and sat perfectly still, hoping whoever it was would just walk past. But the footsteps stopped right outside the big room. Lily turned around slowly and saw Mrs. Chen, the night supervisor, standing in the doorway. Mrs. Chen was a gentle woman in her 60s who worked the evening shift at the children's home. She made sure all the kids got to bed safely and kept watch over the building during the night. "Hello, Lily," Mrs. Chen said quietly. "What are you doing up so late?" Lily felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She had been caught. I couldn't sleep," she said, which wasn't exactly a lie. She had been having trouble sleeping lately, but that was because she kept thinking about piano practice. Mrs. Chen walked into the room and looked at the open piano, then at the music book sitting on top of it. "Have you been practicing piano?" There was no point in lying anymore. Lily nodded, waiting to be told that she needed to go to bed and stop making noise at night. But instead of scolding her, Mrs. Chen smiled. "May I listen?" Lily was surprised. "You want to hear me play?" "I'd love to if you don't mind sharing." Lily's hands were shaking as she placed them back on the keys. She was nowhere near ready to perform for anyone. She could barely play simple exercises without making mistakes. But Mrs. Chen had been so kind and she looked genuinely interested. "I'm not very good yet," Lily warned. "I've only been learning for 2 weeks." "That's okay," Mrs. Chen said, pulling up a chair beside the piano bench. "Everyone starts somewhere." Lily took a deep breath and began to play one of the simple melodies she had been working on. It was called "Mary Had a Little Lamb," and it only used 3 different notes. Even so, her fingers stumbled over the keys and she had to stop twice to figure out which note came next. When she finished, she looked up at Mrs. Chen nervously. "It's terrible, isn't it?" Mrs. Chen shook her head. "It's wonderful. You learned to play that all by yourself?" Lily nodded. "I found this old book inside the piano bench. It's been teaching me where the notes are and how to read the simple songs." Mrs. Chen picked up the music book and flipped through its worn pages. "This is a good book for beginners. I used to play piano when I was younger, and I remember using something similar." Lily's eyes widened. "You play piano?" "I used to. My parents made me take lessons when I was about your age. I wasn't very good at it and I stopped when I went to college. But I still remember some things." An idea began to form in Lily's mind, but she was too nervous to ask directly. Mrs. Chen seemed to understand what she was thinking. "Would you like me to show you a few things? Nothing fancy, just some basics that might help you learn faster?" Lily nodded eagerly. For the next hour, Mrs. Chen sat beside her at the piano bench and showed her how to position her hands properly, how to curve her fingers, and how to read the simple notes on the sheet music. She also taught Lily a few finger exercises that would help make her hands stronger and more flexible. "The most important thing," Mrs. Chen said as she demonstrated a scale, "is to practice a little bit every day. Even 15 minutes of focused practice is better than trying to cram everything into one long session." "But I don't want to wake anyone up," Lily said. "That's why I've been coming here so late." Mrs. Chen thought for a moment, then got up and walked over to a storage closet in the corner of the room. She came back with an old blanket. "Here," she said, draping it over the piano strings inside the instrument. This will muffle the sound quite a bit. You'll still be able to hear what you're playing, but it won't carry as far through the building. Lily tested a few keys with the blanket in place. The sound was much softer, almost like a whisper compared to the normal volume. "This is perfect," she said. "Thank you so much, Mrs. Chen." "There's one more thing," Mrs. Chen said. "I work the night shift here 3 times a week. On those nights, if you want to practice, I can sit with you for a while and help answer any questions you have about the music." Lily felt like crying with gratitude. For the first time since she had started this crazy plan to learn piano, she didn't feel completely alone. From that night on, Lily's practice sessions became even more focused and productive. When Mrs. Chen was working, she would come to the piano room around 10 o'clock. After all the other children were asleep, Mrs. Chen would bring her a cup of warm milk and sit quietly while Lily practiced. Sometimes Mrs. Chen would offer gentle suggestions about finger placement or rhythm. Sometimes she would help Lily figure out a difficult passage in the music book. And sometimes she would just listen, humming along softly when Lily managed to play a melody all the way through without mistakes. On the nights when Mrs. Chen wasn't working, Lily practiced alone with the blanket muffling the sound. She had gotten much better at reading the simple sheet music, and she was starting to work on songs that used both hands instead of just one. Her favorite piece was called Ode to Joy by a composer named Beethoven. It was much harder than Mary Had a Little Lamb, but something about the melody made her feel happy and strong. She practiced it over and over, slowly getting better at coordinating her left hand and right hand to play different parts at the same time. During the day, Lily tried to act normal around the other children and staff. She didn't want anyone to know about her secret piano lessons, partly because she was embarrassed about not being very good yet, and partly because she didn't want to explain about Victoria's cruel challenge, but it was getting harder to hide her excitement. When she mastered a new song or finally figured out a difficult section, she wanted to share her success with someone. She found herself humming melodies from her practice sessions while she did her homework or helped with chores. Amy, her roommate, noticed the change in her behavior. "You seem different lately," she said one morning while they were getting ready for school. "Happier, I guess. Did something good happen?" Lily just smiled and said she was feeling better about things in general. It wasn't a complete lie. Learning piano was making her feel more confident and hopeful about the future, even if Victoria never came back. 3 weeks into her secret practice sessions, Lily made a breakthrough. She was working on a song called Für Elise, another piece by Beethoven that was more challenging than anything she had attempted before. The music book warned that this piece was for intermediate players, but Lily had been drawn to its beautiful, mysterious melody. For days, she had struggled with just the first few measures. Her left hand couldn't keep up with the complicated pattern of notes, and her right hand kept stumbling over the fast-moving melody. She was getting frustrated and starting to wonder if she had reached the limit of what she could teach herself. But on this particular night, something clicked. Her fingers seemed to find the right keys almost automatically. The melody that had been choppy and halting suddenly flowed smoothly from note to note. For 30 beautiful seconds, she played the opening of Für Elise perfectly. When she finished, she sat in stunned silence. Had that really been her playing? It had sounded like real music, not just a beginner's attempt at copying notes from a book. Mrs. Chen, who had been listening from her chair beside the piano, was smiling widely. "That was beautiful, Lily. You're really becoming a pianist." Lily felt tears prick her eyes. Do you think I'm actually getting good at this?" "I think you have natural talent," Mrs. Chen said honestly. "But more than that, I think you have something that's even more important. Dedication. You practice every single day, even when it's difficult and frustrating. That's what separates people who just wish they could play music from people who actually learn to do it." That night, Lily went to bed feeling more confident than she had since Victoria's visit. She still had a lot to learn, and she knew that even her best playing was far from perfect. But for the first time, she believed that she might actually be able to do this. She might actually be able to sit down at that piano and play something beautiful enough to surprise everyone, including Victoria Hayes. She had no idea that Victoria was planning to return much sooner than expected. Victoria Hayes had completely forgotten about her visit to Sunshine Children's Home. In the weeks that followed, She had been busy with board meetings, business deals, and social events. The memory of the little girl and her cruel piano challenge had vanished from her mind like morning mist. It was her assistant, Robert, who reminded her about it on a Thursday morning in late October. "Ms. Hayes," he said, checking his tablet as he walked into her office. "You have a follow-up visit scheduled at the children's home today. Something about checking on adoption paperwork." Victoria looked up from her computer screen with a confused expression. "Adoption paperwork? What are you talking about?" Robert scrolled through his notes. "According to my records, you made some kind of agreement about adopting a child if she could play piano. The director called yesterday to confirm your visit." It took a moment for Victoria to remember. Then she laughed out loud. "Oh, that! I had completely forgotten about that ridiculous thing. I can't believe they actually took me seriously." "So you don't want to go?" Robert asked. Victoria checked her own calendar. She had a lunch meeting that afternoon, but her morning was mostly free. The idea of going back to see how her little joke had played out actually amused her. "No, let's go," she said, standing up and grabbing her coat. "This should be entertaining. I'm curious to see if the girl even tried to learn anything, or if she gave up like I expected." The drive to the children's home took 20 minutes through the city traffic. Victoria spent most of it on phone calls, barely thinking about where they were going or why. In her mind, this was just a quick stop to officially end the silly game she had started weeks ago. When they arrived at Sunshine Children's Home, Mrs. Peterson was waiting for them at the front door. Victoria noticed that the director seemed nervous, fidgeting with her hands and checking the clock on the wall. "Welcome back, Ms. Hayes," Mrs. Peterson said. "Thank you for coming." Victoria waved her hand dismissively. "Let's just get this over with. I assume the girl gave up on learning piano? No shame in that, of course. It's much harder than most people think." Mrs. Peterson's expression was hard to read. "Actually, Ms. Hayes, Lily has been practicing every day since your last visit. She's very excited to play for you." Victoria stopped walking and stared at Mrs. Peterson. "You're joking." "I'm not joking. She's been working very hard. Would you like to see her?" For the first time since arriving, Victoria felt a flicker of genuine curiosity. Had the girl actually tried to learn piano? Even if she had, Victoria couldn't imagine that a 12-year-old with no formal training could have learned anything worth listening to in just a few weeks. "Fine," Victoria said. "Let's see what she's managed to figure out. But I should warn you, I know the difference between real piano playing and just banging on keys randomly." They walked into the main room, where several children were playing quietly. Victoria's eyes immediately found Lily, who was sitting in the same corner where she had been reading during the first visit. This time, though, she wasn't holding a book. She was looking directly at Victoria with an expression that was both nervous and determined. "Hello, Lily," Mrs. Peterson said gently. "Ms. Hayes has come back to hear you play piano." Lily stood up slowly. She had grown a little in the past month, and Victoria noticed that the girl seemed to carry herself differently. There was something more confident about her posture, something more focused about the way she looked at Victoria. "Hello, Ms. Hayes," Lily said quietly. "I've been practicing, like you said." Victoria felt slightly uncomfortable under the girl's steady gaze. She had expected to find a defeated child who had given up on an impossible task. Instead, Lily looked like someone who had been working toward a goal and was ready to show what she had accomplished. "Well then," Victoria said, trying to sound casual, "let's hear what you've learned." The other children in the room had noticed what was happening, and they began to gather around quietly. Word spread quickly through the building that the rich lady was back, and more children appeared in doorways and peeked around corners. Even some of the staff members found reasons to be in the main room. Lily walked over to the old piano and sat down on the bench. Victoria followed, along with Mrs. Peterson and most of the other people in the building. Victoria suddenly felt like she was part of some kind of performance, which made her uncomfortable. This was supposed to be a quick visit to end a joke, not a public event. "Before I play," Lily said, "I want to thank Mrs. Chen for helping me learn to read the music better." Victoria glanced around and saw an older woman standing near the back of the crowd, smiling proudly at Lily. So the girl had gotten help. That was probably cheating, though Victoria realized she hadn't actually set any rules about that. Lily opened the piano cover and placed her hands over the keys. Victoria expected her to launch immediately into whatever simple song she had managed to memorize. Instead, Lily sat quietly for a moment as if she was gathering her thoughts or calming her nerves. "What are you going to play?" Victoria asked impatiently. "It's called Für Elise," Lily said. "By Ludwig van Beethoven." Victoria felt her eyebrows shoot up in surprise. Für Elise wasn't a beginner's song. It was a piece that even intermediate piano students found challenging. Either this girl was much more ambitious than Victoria had thought, or she was about to embarrass herself in front of everyone. "That's quite an ambitious choice," Victoria said. "Are you sure you wouldn't prefer something simpler? Like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star?" There was a slight mocking tone in Victoria's voice, but Lily didn't seem to notice. She was looking down at the keys with intense concentration. "I learned some simple songs too," Lily said. "But this one is my favorite. It makes me feel hopeful." Before Victoria could respond, Lily began to play. The first notes of Für Elise filled the room, and Victoria felt her breath catch in her throat. This wasn't the clumsy attempt she had expected. The melody was clear and recognizable, flowing from note to note with surprising grace. Lily's technique wasn't perfect. Victoria could see that her finger position wasn't quite right, and her timing was slightly off in a few places. But there was something else in her playing that Victoria hadn't expected: emotion. The girl wasn't just playing the notes she had memorized. She was telling a story with the music, making each phrase rise and fall with feeling. When the melody became soft and gentle, Lily's touch on the keys became delicate and careful. When the music called for more intensity, her playing became stronger and more passionate. Victoria found herself leaning forward, listening more carefully than she had planned to. Around the room, she could see that everyone else was just as captivated. The other children were perfectly still, watching Lily's fingers dance across the keys. Mrs. Peterson had tears in her eyes. Even the staff members were smiling with pride and amazement. As the piece continued, Victoria realized something that shocked her. Lily was genuinely talented. This wasn't just the result of memorization and practice. The girl had musical instincts that couldn't be taught. She understood how to shape a phrase, how to make the melody sing, how to use the piano to express feelings that she couldn't put into words. When Lily reached the section of the piece that Victoria knew was particularly difficult, she held her breath. This was where most intermediate students stumbled, where the left hand had to play a complex pattern while the right hand carried the melody. But Lily navigated through it smoothly, her two hands working together as if she had been playing piano for years instead of weeks. As the final notes of Für Elise faded away, the room remained silent for several seconds. Then slowly the other children began to clap. Mrs. Peterson was wiping tears from her cheeks. Mrs. Chen was beaming with pride. Victoria stood frozen, staring at the 12-year-old girl who had just turned her cruel joke into something beautiful. Lily looked up at her with those same determined eyes. "Did I play it well enough?" she asked quietly. Victoria opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. For the first time in years, she was completely speechless. The girl had done more than meet her challenge. She had exceeded it in ways Victoria never could have imagined. And now, Victoria realized with a growing sense of panic, she was going to have to keep her promise. The silence in the room stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Victoria stood beside the old piano, staring down at Lily, while everyone else waited for her response. The girl had just played a beautiful, heartfelt performance of one of the most beloved pieces in classical music, and Victoria was completely unprepared for how it made her feel. Victoria started, then stopped. She looked around the room at all the expectant faces watching her. The other children, Mrs. Peterson, Mrs. Chen, and various staff members were all waiting to see what she would say. Victoria tried again, but the words seemed stuck in her throat. Lily was still sitting at the piano bench, her hands folded in her lap, looking up at Victoria with patient hope. "Did you like it?" she asked softly. The simple question hit Victoria like a physical blow. Did she like it? She had come here expecting to laugh at a child's clumsy attempt to bang out a simple tune. Instead, she had just witnessed something that touched a part of her heart she had forgotten existed. "How did you learn to play like that?" Victoria asked, her voice quieter than usual. "I practiced every night," Lily said. "Mrs. Chen helped me understand how to read the music better, and I found some books in the piano bench that taught me about finger positions and timing." Victoria looked over at Mrs. Chen, who nodded modestly. Lily did most of the work herself, the older woman said. I just gave her a few pointers. She has natural musical ability that you can't teach. Natural ability, Victoria repeated almost to herself. She had built her entire fortune on the idea that success came from intelligence, hard work, and ruthless determination. But what she had just heard seemed to come from somewhere deeper than any of those things. Would you like me to play something else? Lily asked. I learned a few other pieces too. Victoria wanted to say no. She wanted to make some excuse and leave immediately, before this situation became any more complicated than it already was. But something in the girl's voice made her nod instead. Yes, she heard herself saying. I'd like to hear more. Lily's face lit up with a smile that transformed her entire appearance. She turned back to the piano and thought for a moment. This one is called Canon in D by Bach. Well, it's actually by Pachelbel, but everyone calls it the Bach piece. Mrs. Chen taught me the difference. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play a melody that Victoria recognized immediately. It was a piece often played at weddings, gentle and flowing, with a simple beauty that made it beloved by people who didn't even consider themselves fans of classical music. But as Lily played, Victoria began to understand that there was nothing simple about what the girl was doing. The piece required both hands to play different parts that wove together like a conversation. Lily's left hand provided a steady walking bass line, while her right hand carried the main melody. Every few measures, the parts would switch or combine in ways that created new harmonies. Victoria found herself studying Lily's face as she played. The girl's eyes were closed, and she had a look of deep concentration mixed with pure joy. It was clear that she wasn't just playing the notes because she had memorized them. She was feeling every phrase, every harmonic change, every moment where the music swelled or became more delicate. How was it possible that a 12-year-old orphan, practicing alone on an old battered piano, could have developed such musical sensitivity in just a few weeks? As the canon came to its gentle conclusion, Victoria realized that the answer was both simple and profound. Lily had talent, yes, but more than that, she had something that Victoria had lost somewhere along the way in her climb to wealth and success. The ability to put her whole heart into something just because it was beautiful. When the last notes faded away, the applause was more enthusiastic than it had been after Für Elise. Some of the younger children were actually cheering. Mrs. Peterson was openly crying now, not trying to hide her tears. That was magnificent. Sweetie, Mrs. Peterson said, walking over to give Lily a hug. I had no idea you had been learning to play so beautifully. Lily hugged her back, then looked at Victoria again. I have one more piece if you want to hear it. It's the one I've been working on the longest. Victoria nodded, not trusting herself to speak. This time, Lily's choice surprised everyone in the room. Instead of another classical piece, she began to play a gentle modern melody that seemed to float through the air like a lullaby. Victoria didn't recognize it at first, but as Lily continued, she realized it was Imagine by John Lennon. The choice was perfect for Lily's level of skill and emotional development. The song was technically simpler than the classical pieces she had just performed, but it allowed her to put even more of her own interpretation into the music. She played some phrases softly, almost like a whisper, while giving others more strength and conviction. When she reached the chorus, several of the older children began to hum along quietly. The song's message about peace and hope seemed to fill the room, and Victoria found herself thinking about what it meant to imagine a better world. As Lily played the final chorus, she opened her eyes and looked directly at Victoria. For a moment, their gazes met across the old piano, and Victoria felt something shift inside her chest. This wasn't just a performance anymore. It was a conversation, a question, a plea. The girl was playing with such sincerity, such genuine hope, that Victoria suddenly understood what Mrs. Chen had meant about Lily having something that couldn't be taught. It wasn't just musical ability. It was the courage to be vulnerable, to put her dreams and feelings out in the open where they could be crushed or celebrated. When Imagine came to its end, the room erupted in applause. The children were cheering and clapping. Mrs. Peterson was beaming with pride, and even Victoria's assistant Robert, who had been standing quietly in the back, was smiling widely, but Victoria barely heard the applause. She was staring at Lily, who was looking back at her with a mixture of hope and fear in her young eyes. So, Lily said quietly, barely audible over the celebrating children, was that good enough? Victoria opened her mouth, then closed it again. The girl had more than fulfilled the challenge. She had taken Victoria's cruel joke and turned it into something beautiful and meaningful. She had shown dedication, talent, and a kind of emotional honesty that Victoria hadn't encountered in her adult world of business and social climbing. But adopting a child, actually bringing this girl into her life, taking responsibility for raising her, becoming something like a mother, Victoria felt panic rising in her chest. She had never wanted children. She had built her life around independence, success, and the freedom to focus entirely on her own goals. "I need to think," Victoria said finally, her voice sounding strange and distant to her own ears. The celebration in the room died down as everyone realized that Victoria hadn't given a clear answer. Lily's hopeful expression began to fade, replaced by the careful, guarded look she had worn when Victoria first met her. "Think about what?" Mrs. Peterson asked, stepping protectively closer to Lily. Victoria looked around the room at all the faces watching her. Some were curious, some were hopeful, and some were beginning to look angry as they realized she might be backing out of her promise. "I made a commitment," Victoria said slowly, "and she fulfilled her part of it beautifully. I need some time to arrange things properly." It wasn't exactly a yes, but it wasn't a no either. Lily's face showed she understood the difference, but she nodded politely. "Thank you for listening to me play," she said with quiet dignity. "I'm glad I got to share the music with you." Victoria felt her heart twist at the girl's gracious response. Even in the face of uncertainty, Lily was showing more maturity and kindness than most adults Victoria knew. "I'll be in touch," Victoria said to Mrs. Peterson, then turned and walked quickly toward the door. As she left Sunshine Children's Home for the second time, Victoria couldn't get the sound of Lily's playing out of her head. More than that, she couldn't forget the look in the girl's eyes when she had played Imagine. It was the look of someone who still believed that beautiful things were possible, even after losing everything she had once loved. For the first time in years, Victoria Hayes didn't know what she was going to do next. Victoria sat in the back of her car as Robert drove them back to her office, but she wasn't seeing the city streets passing by outside the window. Instead, she kept hearing the gentle melody of Imagine playing over and over in her mind, mixed with the image of Lily's hopeful eyes. "That was quite something," Robert said, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. "The girl really can play," Victoria nodded absently. "Yes, she can. So what happens now? Do you want me to call your lawyer about adoption procedures?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Victoria realized she had no idea how to answer it. Part of her wanted to forget this whole thing had happened, to go back to her normal life and pretend she had never made that foolish challenge. But another part of her, a part that had been sleeping for years, was wide awake now and wouldn't be ignored. "Not yet," she said finally. "I need to think." Back at her office, Victoria tried to focus on her work, but concentration was impossible. Every time she looked at her computer screen or picked up a phone, her mind wandered back to the children's home. She found herself remembering details that had seemed unimportant at the time. The way the other children had gathered around to listen to Lily play, the pride on Mrs. Peterson's face, the gentle way Mrs. Chen had spoken about helping Lily learn to read music. Around 3 o'clock, Victoria gave up pretending to work and asked Robert to clear her schedule for the rest of the day. She needed to go somewhere quiet to think, so she drove to her penthouse apartment and sat on her balcony overlooking the city. The apartment was beautiful and expensive, filled with modern art and designer furniture. Everything was perfectly arranged and spotlessly clean. It was also completely silent and felt utterly empty. Victoria tried to imagine what it would be like to have a 12-year-old girl living here. There would be noise and mess, school bags and homework scattered around, piano music drifting from room to room. The idea should have horrified her, but instead she found it strangely appealing. When had her life become so quiet and sterile? When had she stopped noticing beauty and started focusing only on profit margins and business strategies? She thought about Lily's performance of Fur Elise. The girl had played with such feeling, such genuine emotion, that it had made Victoria remember what it was like to care about something beyond money and success. When was the last time Victoria had felt that kind of passion about anything? As the afternoon wore on, Victoria found herself thinking not just about Lily, but about her own childhood. She had grown up in a middle-class family, with parents who had encouraged her to work hard and achieve her goals. They had been proud of her success, but they had also worried that she was becoming too focused on wealth and status. Money is a tool, her father had once told her. It should help you build a life worth living, not become the only thing you live for. Victoria had dismissed his concern at the time. She was young and ambitious, and she thought her parents just didn't understand what it took to succeed in the modern world. But sitting on her balcony now, surrounded by all the expensive things her success had bought her, she wondered if maybe her father had been right. What kind of life had she actually built? She had business associates, not friends. She had employees who respected her success, but she doubted any of them actually liked her as a person. She went to social events and charity galas, but only because they were good for her image and her business connections. When was the last time someone had looked at her the way Lily had looked at her today? With hope? With trust? With the belief that Victoria might actually be capable of kindness? That evening, Victoria did something she hadn't done in years. Instead of working late or attending a business dinner, she ordered takeout food and sat in her living room thinking about what it would mean to become someone's mother. She had never wanted children because she had always assumed they would interfere with her career goals. Raising a child would mean less time for work, less freedom to travel, more responsibilities and complications. But Lily wasn't a baby who would need constant care. She was 12 years old, smart and independent. She had already shown that she could dedicate herself to learning something difficult and doing it well. More than that, Lily had something Victoria realized she desperately needed: the ability to find joy and beauty in simple things. The girl had learned to play piano not because someone was paying her to do it, not because it would advance her career, but simply because the music itself was worth learning. Victoria walked over to the window and looked out at the city lights twinkling below. Somewhere out there, Lily was probably lying in her narrow bed at the children's home, wondering if Victoria would keep her promise or find some excuse to break it. The thought made Victoria's chest tighten with an emotion she hadn't felt in years. Guilt. Not the strategic guilt she sometimes used in business negotiations, but real, genuine remorse for the pain she might be causing a child who had already experienced too much disappointment in her young life. She picked up her phone and found herself scrolling through her contacts, looking for someone she could talk to about this situation. But as she went through the list of names, she realized that she didn't have a single person in her life who would give her honest, caring advice about something this personal. Every relationship she had was built around business or social status. Finally, she put the phone down and admitted something to herself that she hadn't wanted to face. She was lonely. Desperately, deeply lonely in a way that all her money and success couldn't fix. That night, Victoria barely slept. She kept thinking about the way Lily had played Imagine with such hope and sincerity. The girl had taken a song about dreaming of a better world and made it feel like a personal message. What if Victoria could be part of making Lily's world better? What if, instead of seeing adoption as a burden or complication, she could see it as an opportunity to be part of something meaningful for the first time in years? The next morning, Victoria called Mrs. Peterson. "Mrs. Peterson, this is Victoria Hayes. I wanted to ask you some questions about Lily." "Of course, Ms. Hayes, what would you like to know?" "Tell me about her. Not just her musical ability, but who she is as a person, what she's like to live with, what she cares about, what makes her happy." Mrs. Peterson's voice warmed noticeably. "Lily is one of the most thoughtful children I've ever cared for. She's quiet, but not because she's shy. She's the kind of person who thinks before she speaks, who notices things other people miss." "What kinds of things?" "Well, she always knows when one of the younger children is feeling sad or scared. She'll sit with them and read stories or help them with their homework. She never asks for recognition or praise. She just sees that someone needs help and provides it." Victoria found herself smiling slightly. "What else?" "She's incredibly responsible. I've never had to remind her to do her chores or her homework. And she's curious about everything. She reads constantly, asks thoughtful questions about the world. I think she would thrive in an environment where she had access to more books, more learning opportunities." "And the piano?" Had she ever shown interest in music before? Mrs. Peterson was quiet for a moment. "You know, now that I think about it, she had. Sometimes I would catch her humming to herself, or tapping out rhythms with her fingers when she thought no one was looking. But we don't have the resources to provide music lessons for the children. When you made your a challenge, it gave her a reason to explore something she had always been drawn to." After she hung up, Victoria sat quietly for a long time. Then she picked up the phone again and called her lawyer. "David, I need you to research adoption procedures for me. Specifically, what would be involved in adopting a 12-year-old girl from a children's home." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Are you serious, Victoria?" "Completely serious. I need to know what steps are involved, how long the process takes, what kind of home studies or interviews might be required." "This is unexpected. Can I ask what brought this on?" Victoria looked out her office window toward the part of the city where Sunshine Children's Home was located. "I made a promise to someone," she said, "and I think it's time I started keeping my promises." That afternoon, Victoria did something else she hadn't done in years. She went shopping, not for herself, but for someone else. She found herself in the music section of a large bookstore, looking at piano books and sheet music. She bought several collections of classical pieces arranged for intermediate players, some jazz standards, and even a few books of popular songs. Then, almost without thinking, she wandered over to the children's section and picked out some novels she thought a bright 12-year-old might enjoy. As she stood in line to pay for her purchases, Victoria realized that for the first time in months, she was genuinely excited about something. Not excited about a business deal or a profit margin, but excited about the possibility of sharing these books with someone who would appreciate them. Maybe, she thought, it was time to find out if Victoria Hayes could be more than just a successful businesswoman. Maybe it was time to find out if she could be someone worth looking up to with hope in their eyes. Victoria spent the next 3 days learning everything she could about adoption procedures, child psychology, and what it meant to be a guardian to a 12-year-old. She read books, researched online, and even called a few child development experts for advice. What she discovered both scared and motivated her. Adopting a child wasn't just about providing a home and paying for expenses. It meant becoming responsible for shaping another person's life, helping them navigate the challenges of growing up, and being there during both good times and difficult ones. The more she learned, the more Victoria realized how unprepared she was for this kind of responsibility. She had never even had a pet, let alone cared for a child. Her life was structured around work schedules, business trips, and social obligations that could last until late at night. How could she fit a child into that kind of lifestyle? But every time she started to convince herself that adoption was a mistake, she would remember the sound of Lily playing Für Elise, and the doubt would fade away. There had been something so pure and hopeful in that music, something that reminded Victoria of who she used to be before success and ambition had taken over her life. On Friday morning, Victoria made a decision that surprised even herself. She called her assistant and told him to clear her schedule for the entire day. Then she drove back to Sunshine Children's Home, not for an official visit, but just to observe. She parked across the street and watched through the windows as the children went about their daily routines. She saw Lily helping a younger boy with what looked like homework, patiently explaining something while he nodded and smiled. Later, she watched as Lily sat quietly reading in the same corner where Victoria had first noticed her, occasionally looking up to check on the other children playing nearby. There was something calm and steady about the way Lily moved through her day. She wasn't the loudest or most energetic child in the room, but she seemed to be a stable presence that the others gravitated toward. When a little girl fell and scraped her knee, Lily was the first one to help her up and find Mrs. Peterson. When two boys started arguing over a toy, Lily quietly suggested a way they could share it. Victoria found herself thinking about her own childhood again. She had been ambitious and focused even as a young person, always working toward the next goal, the next achievement. But watching Lily, she saw something she had never learned: the ability to be present in the moment, to notice what was happening around her and respond with kindness. That evening, Victoria called her lawyer again. "David, I want to move forward with the adoption process. What do I need to do first?" "Victoria, are you absolutely sure about this?" "Adoption is permanent. You can't change your mind in 6 months if it turns out to be more difficult than you expected." Victoria looked around her quiet, empty apartment. "I'm sure. What's the first step?" "You'll need to apply to become a licensed adoptive parent. That involves background checks, financial reviews, home studies, and several interviews with social workers. The process typically takes several months." "Several months?" Victoria felt a stab of panic. What happens to Lily during that time? What if someone else wants to adopt her? Well, you could potentially become her foster parent while the adoption process moves forward. That would allow her to live with you during the waiting period, assuming the initial evaluations go well. Victoria had not considered the possibility of fostering, but it made sense. It would give both her and Lily a chance to adjust to living together before making the commitment permanent. Let's do that then. Foster care first with the goal of adoption. How quickly can we get started? Over the weekend, Victoria found herself making lists of everything she would need to change about her life and her home to make them suitable for a child. She would need to convert one of her spare rooms into a bedroom for Lily. She would need to learn about things like school schedules, after-school activities, and how to balance work responsibilities with parenting duties. Most importantly, she would need to buy a piano. On Monday morning, Victoria went to 3 different music stores before finding exactly what she was looking for. It was a beautiful baby grand piano, not as large as a concert grand but much more elegant than an upright. The wood was a rich, warm cherry, and when the salesman played a few notes, the sound was clear and resonant. "This is a wonderful instrument," the salesman said. "Perfect for a serious student. Does your daughter take lessons?" Victoria hesitated. "She will be my daughter soon. And yes, she's quite talented." The words felt strange coming out of her mouth, but also surprisingly right. My daughter. Victoria had never imagined herself saying those words, but now she found she liked the sound of them. She arranged for the piano to be delivered and tuned the following week, then drove to a furniture store to look at bedroom sets. She chose simple, elegant pieces in light wood, with a large bookshelf and a comfortable reading chair by the window. She wanted the room to feel warm and welcoming, a place where a young person could study, read, and have privacy when needed. That afternoon, Victoria called Mrs. Peterson again. "Mrs. Peterson, I'd like to schedule another visit. I want to talk to Lily about the possibility of coming to live with me." "Oh my," Mrs. Peterson said, sounding both surprised and pleased. "Are you saying you want to go through with the adoption?" "I'm saying I want to try. I know I have a lot to learn about being a parent, and I know this will be a big adjustment for both of us. But I think Lily deserves a chance at a different kind of life, and I think maybe I deserve a chance to be part of something meaningful." When Victoria arrived at the children's home the next day, she felt more nervous than she had before any business meeting or presentation in her adult life. She was about to have a conversation that could change 2 lives forever. Mrs. Peterson brought Lily to a small, quiet room where they could talk privately. The girl looked curious but cautious, probably wondering why Victoria had returned so soon after her last visit. "Lily," Victoria began, "I want to apologize for the way I acted when I first met you. My challenge about the piano was meant as a joke, and it was cruel of me to play with your hopes like that." Lily nodded but didn't say anything. "But then you played for me," Victoria continued, "and you showed me something I had forgotten existed. You showed me what it looks like when someone puts their whole heart into something beautiful, just because it's worth doing." "I really love music," Lily said quietly. "Learning to play piano has been the best thing that's happened to me in a long time." Victoria felt her throat tighten. "I want to make you an offer, but this time it's a real one, not a joke. I would like you to come live with me. I want to adopt you and become your mother." Lily's eyes went wide. "Really? Really? But I want you to understand what this would mean. It would mean leaving this place and the people you know. It would mean living with someone who has never been a parent before and is probably going to make a lot of mistakes. It would mean changes to your whole life." "What about piano?" Lily asked. "Could I keep learning?" Victoria smiled. "I bought you a piano. A beautiful one. And I want to find you the best piano teacher in the city." For the first time since Victoria had met her, Lily's careful composure broke. Tears started running down her cheeks, but she was also smiling. "You really want me to be your daughter?" Victoria reached across the table and took Lily's hands in hers. "I really do. I know I'm not the warm, motherly type you probably hoped for, but I promise you this. I will do everything in my power to give you opportunities to grow and learn and become whatever you want to be. And I will never ever make you feel like you have to earn your place in my home." Lily squeezed Victoria's hands. "When could I come live with you?" "We have to go through some legal processes first. It might take a few months, but if you want, you could start visiting my apartment on weekends, getting used to the idea gradually." Lily nodded eagerly. "I would like that very much." As they walked back to the main room together, Victoria felt something she hadn't experienced in years, The sense that she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. For the first time since her parents died, Lily looked like she believed in the possibility of happiness again. And for the first time since her own childhood, Victoria felt like she had found something more valuable than money or success. She had found purpose. 3 months later, Victoria stood in the sunroom of her apartment, watching as 2 piano movers carefully positioned the cherry wood baby grand in the perfect spot near the large windows. The morning light streaming through the glass would be perfect for reading sheet music, and the acoustics in the room made every note ring clear and beautiful. Today was the day Lily would officially move in. The foster care approval had come through 6 weeks ago, and Lily had been spending weekends at Victoria's apartment, gradually getting used to her new life. But today would be different. Today she would wake up here tomorrow morning and the morning after that, and every morning for the foreseeable future. Victoria felt a familiar flutter of nervousness in her stomach. Over the past 3 months, she had learned more about parenting, child development, and 12-year-old girls than she had ever imagined she would need to know. She had also learned something surprising about herself. She was actually good at this. Not perfect, certainly. There had been awkward moments and misunderstandings, like the time she had scheduled a business dinner on a Friday night and forgotten that it was a school night for Lily, or the time she had tried to help with math homework and discovered that teaching methods had changed significantly since her own childhood, but there had been wonderful moments too. Like the Saturday morning when they had cooked breakfast together, and Lily had patiently taught Victoria how to make proper pancakes. Or the evening when they had gone to a concert together, and Victoria had watched Lily's face light up as she listened to a professional pianist perform Chopin. Most importantly, Victoria had discovered that she genuinely enjoyed Lily's company. The girl was thoughtful, curious, and surprisingly funny once she felt comfortable enough to share her sense of humor. She asked interesting questions about Victoria's business, offered helpful suggestions for decorating the apartment, and had even convinced Victoria to try some books and movies she never would have considered before. The piano movers finished their work and left, and Victoria ran her hand along the smooth surface of the instrument. She had also been taking piano lessons, determined to understand the music that had become such an important part of Lily's life. She wasn't very good yet, but she was improving, and she loved the way Lily's face lit up when they practiced simple duets together. The doorbell rang, and Victoria felt her heart skip with excitement. That would be Mrs. Peterson bringing Lily for her permanent move-in day. Victoria opened the door to find Lily standing with a single suitcase and a backpack, looking both excited and nervous. Mrs. Peterson was behind her, carrying a small box that Victoria knew contained Lily's most precious possessions, some photos of her parents, a few favorite books, and the old music book she had used to teach herself piano. "Welcome home, sweetie," Victoria said, giving Lily a hug that felt more natural than she had expected. "Thank you," Lily said, smiling up at her. "I can't believe this is really happening." Mrs. Peterson came inside and looked around the apartment with approval. Over the past 3 months, Victoria had made significant changes to make the space more suitable for a child. The sterile, modern decor had been softened with warmer colors and more comfortable furniture. Lily's room was bright and welcoming, with the bookshelf already filled with new books and the desk positioned perfectly for homework. But the biggest change was in the sunroom, where the beautiful piano now dominated the space. "Oh my goodness," Lily breathed, walking over to the instrument. "It's even more beautiful than I remembered. Would you like to play something?" Victoria asked. Lily sat down at the bench and ran her fingers over the keys. The sound was rich and clear, so much better than the old piano at the children's home. She began to play Fur Elise, the piece that had started this whole journey. And Victoria was amazed at how much her technique had improved over the past few months. Victoria had arranged for Lily to take lessons with one of the city's best piano teachers, a kind woman named Professor Martinez, who had been impressed with Lily's natural ability and dedication to practice. Under professional guidance, Lily's playing had become more refined while losing none of its emotional expressiveness. As the familiar melody filled the sunroom, Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. Not tears of sadness, but tears of gratitude for the unexpected turn her life had taken. When Lily finished playing, Mrs. Peterson clapped softly. "That was beautiful, dear. You've improved so much." Professor Martinez says I'm ready to start working on some intermediate pieces by Mozart, Lily said proudly. And Victoria has been learning to play too, so we can do duets. Mrs. Peterson looked at Victoria with surprise. You're taking piano lessons? Victoria felt herself blush slightly. I wanted to understand what Lily loves about music, and I thought it would be something we could share together. After Mrs. Peterson left, Victoria and Lily spent the afternoon getting her settled into her new room. As they unpacked Lily's clothes and arranged her books on the shelf, Victoria marveled at how normal and right this felt. She had been afraid that having another person in her space would feel intrusive or overwhelming. But instead, it felt like the apartment had been incomplete before and was now whole. That evening, as they sat down to dinner together, Lily looked around the dining room with wonder. I still can't believe I live here now, she said. Sometimes I'm afraid I'll wake up and find out this was all a dream. Victoria reached across the table and took her hand. It's not a dream. This is your home now for as long as you want it to be. What if I mess up? What if I do something wrong and you change your mind? The question broke Victoria's heart, because she could see that despite all the progress they had made, Lily still carried the fear of being abandoned again. It would probably take time for her to fully believe that this new life was permanent and secure. Lily, listen to me, Victoria said seriously. Everyone makes mistakes. I've made plenty of them in the past few months, and I'll probably make plenty more. Making mistakes doesn't mean you lose your place in this family. This is your home, and I am your mother now, and that's not going to change because of anything you do or don't do. Lily nodded, and Victoria could see some of the tension leave her shoulders. Besides, Victoria added with a smile, if anyone should be worried about messing up, it's me. I'm the one who's never been a parent before. You're doing great, Lily said softly. You're nothing like I thought you would be when I first met you. Victoria laughed. I'm nothing like I thought I would be either. You've changed me, Lily. You've made me remember what it's like to care about something besides work.